Paul Donovan, who is Global Chief Economist at UBS Wealth Management. He joined them in August of 2016, and he's a member of the Global Investment Committee, a UBS opinion leader, a sponsor of UBS Speak Up, and a UBS Pride ally, and is responsible for developing and presenting the UBS Economic Outlook, marketing the view around the world, and is here to do that this evening. Please welcome Paul to the stage.
Thank you very much, Siki. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming along this evening. I'm going to make the audio-visual team's life a nightmare. I'm not going to use the stage. I'm going to wander around a bit, if that's okay with you. And I'm not going to give the economic outlook. I'm not going to say whether or not the Fed is going to reduce its bond holdings. It'll start in October. I'm not going to say whether the European Central Bank's going to raise rates. No, of course it's not. Draghi is addicted to easing. What I'm going to do is talk to you about the medium term, the next 10 years or so, and the changes that are coming in the global economy today, and why it is important to understand the nature of these changes. What is called the Fourth Industrial Revolution is about robotics, artificial intelligence, digitization, the Internet of Things, the fact that you can connect your toaster to the internet if you want to. Why you would want to, I have no idea, but you can. These changes that are coming are, in economic terms, profound. Now, economists really don't care about technology. We're not interested in technology. I use a BlackBerry still, for goodness sake. But the technological changes that we are seeing are going to change how we work, where we work, and what we do. And the reason this has been labeled an industrial revolution is this is going to be revolutionary. It's going to change not just the way of doing business. This is going to change society, the way society functions. And that starts to raise an important issue. When we talk about technological change, a lot of people instinctively think, oh, I should buy shares in Google or I should buy shares in a microchip manufacturer because it's technological change. But that's not actually the logical response. You need to look far broader than considering technology and start to think about what companies have the right model, what companies are going to succeed in this sort of change. So what sort of societal economic shifts are we talking about? Well, one of the really interesting things about the Fourth Industrial Revolution is that in many ways, it's a reversal of what happened in the First Industrial Revolution in the 1760s in the United Kingdom. So in the First Industrial Revolution, we introduced coal and steam-powered machinery, and particularly one of the first things to change was the cloth industry, clothing. And you would take a self-employed weaver making cloth in the west of England. And this person would work from home, self-employed. They'd work whatever hours they wanted to work. They would live in a village, live in a cottage in a village. They would grow their own food. Virtually everything they owned would have come from the immediate environment in which they lived. These people never left their villages, or they never went more than 10 miles beyond their village. You take that person in 1760 and you move them to a dark satanic mill in Manchester, where they are no longer self-employed, they're working for somebody else. They no longer work what hours they want, they work a rigid shift system. But think what else you're changing. This person is now living in an urban environment, in typically a slum dwelling in the centre of Manchester. That's changed demand for housing. They can no longer grow their own food. Believe me, nothing grows in Manchester. So food has to be shipped into them. You need a transport network to get food from the countryside into the centre of the city. Health changes, not for the better, for the most part. You change sanitation. You change the built infrastructure. You change the need for education. They're operating machinery. They need training on how to do that. You change politics. It is very difficult to riot on your own in the middle of a cornfield. If you're in the middle of Manchester, surrounded by 5,000 people in exactly the same terrible conditions, quite easy to riot and to change politics. So you can see that the technology changed the clothing industry, well, that's fine. But actually it goes far, far beyond that in a very short space of time. Think what's happening now. You take an economist working for a dark, satanic bank in the middle of the City of London. This economist can now become a self-employed consultant. They can work from home. The technology that we have makes this more and more common. In the United Kingdom, in the years since 2008, the number of companies in the United Kingdom has increased by 50%. 50% increase in the number of companies in the UK. 70% of companies in the UK today, however, employ nobody. They're one-person businesses. Because if you want to be self-employed, it's actually efficient to do so as a company. You set yourself up as a company. And this has become a shift in how we're working. But think what happens if people start working from home more. UBS in London last year moved into a new building, known to the staff as the Death Star, because that's what it looks like. And it's a fantastic new space. For the first time ever in London, all UBS employees are in the one building. We have 5,500 desks in this building. We have 6,500 staff. Now, there are two possible explanations for this discrepancy. One, we have a cost-cutting regime coming, which I'm unaware of. Or two, UBS management, in its infinite wisdom, has worked out that on average I spend 3 days a month in our London office. So why do I need a desk? We can be flexible working. So the fact that we now have very regularly members of staff working from home means our demand for real estate has gone down. We've gone from 5 buildings to 1. The density rate, the number of people per square meter, has gone up, but everybody's got more space because you've moved to flexible working. Technology, the fact that I can work on a laptop from home, has led to a shift in demand for real estate, which is about as far from technology as it is possible to get. We change the way the economy operates. It goes beyond that. If I'm working from home, I don't need to commute to the office. If I'm working in London, it's a half hour on the Central Line, and that's on a good day, commuting to the office. If I'm working from home in Wiltshire, my commute to the office means rolling out of bed and stumbling 10 meters to my study. There's no need for transport infrastructure in that sense. But if I'm working from home, I'm not going to go to Pret-a-Manger and buy a sandwich because the nearest Pret-a-Manger is about 30 miles away. I'm going to make a sandwich at home, or I'm going to go across to the village shop. My demand for food has all of a sudden shifted as I work from home. I need technology infrastructure at home, not in the centre of London. I need high-speed broadband. I need good quality internet access. With that, I can achieve a huge amount. I can even do a television interview from home. Several times, CNBC, CNN, if you see me there with dark panelled bookshelves behind, copies of my book prominently displayed, I'll be sitting there, I'm wearing shirt, tie, jacket, I look just as I do in a TV studio. Under the desk, I'm just wearing boxer shorts, but you never need to know that. We can now do this over Skype, and people don't realize that you're not working from home. So by changing our working practices, We're changing more than just technology. This is changing huge areas of the economy. It's also creating problems. It's creating big problems with the data. So what we're finding is that as we shift how we work and we change what we're doing, we are starting to blur the distinction between what is personal, consumer, and what is business. So this morning, when I arrived in South Africa, I was reading the Financial Times. I'm flicking through the Financial Times in the back of the taxi on my iPad. Keeping up to date with the latest news, preparing for a conference call with London. My iPad, not UBS's iPad. I'm using the iPad for work, but UBS doesn't pay for this. UBS very generously does pay for my subscription to the Financial Times at about $1 a month. I have to come up with the $500 for the iPad. Once again, I am subsidizing UBS shareholders. But this is becoming more and more common. In various sectors of the economy, according to survey evidence, over half the employees say that they spend more than 50% of their time on their smartphones accessing work email. Again, you're subsidizing, you're blurring the distinction between what is investment and what's consumer spending. We're confusing work and life. It's called IT consumerization, and it's a big trend that has been developing in the last few years. So we've got a lot of profound changes that lie ahead. And there are 4 issues that I'd like to spend the rest of my time running through, which come up repeatedly with investors. So the first of these is, what does this mean for the labor market? Should we just now give up, surrender to our robot overlords and accept the inevitable? Or are we going to be able to find jobs in the future? The second issue is what this means for pricing. Are we going to see a collapse in inflation as we see more technology, more efficiency driving down prices? Because that's got profound implications for economics. The third issue is globalization. Globalization has been a dramatic story in the last 20 years. Does it continue in the next 20 years? And then finally, what is the model for success in the 4th industrial revolution? How do you achieve success in the next 20 years? On the jobs front, we believe that over the next 20 years, 40% of jobs, 40% of jobs, will be affected by the 4th industrial revolution in a significant way. The jobs will change. This does not mean 40% of the population will lose their jobs. What we will find is that jobs will have to adapt. The tasks that people do will shift. My own job is a good example of this. I started at UBS in the investment bank 25 years ago as our Japanese economist. And 25 years ago, this was pre-internet. The main revolutionary form of international communication was the fax machine. And so a big part of my job was that every single month, for 1 week every month, I would take the Bank of Japan's monthly statistical bulletin, which is a big book that was couriered to me from Tokyo, and I would enter the data from the Bank of Japan's monthly statistical bulletin into a Lotus 123 spreadsheet. I don't know if anybody remembers those. By hand. 1 week a month was spent typing numbers in. Because otherwise we couldn't do charts, we couldn't analyze the data, we got no clue what was going on. You had to enter the data by hand. I don't do that anymore. Because of course now it takes 30 seconds downloading from the Bank of Japan's website, and the entire Bank of Japan monthly statistical bulletin is there on your desktop. So the job has changed. A quarter of the job that I was hired to do no longer exists, but my job still exists. I'm still gainfully employed, at least as of this morning. So we haven't lost jobs, we've changed them. Some jobs will be lost. And economic analysis suggests that somewhere between 8 and 9% of jobs in the economy will disappear And we need to come up with a plan for helping the people who will lose those jobs, because otherwise they will suffer considerably and some kind of social safety net is required. But there are two other points I would emphasize on the labor market. The first is that the fourth industrial revolution will also create jobs. One of the highest paid jobs in America today, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Occupation Survey, is a mobile phone app designer. This is a job that did not exist 10 years ago because the iPhone was launched in 2007. So a job which didn't exist 10 years ago is now one of the highest paid jobs in the States, at least for the time being. We have created a job that it was impossible to imagine before the iPhone came along. And the other point I would stress is that just because technology can replace us doesn't mean that it will replace us. People like dealing with people. In our wonderful new office in London, we have on every single floor, we have 12 floors, every single floor, there are 2 free coffee vending areas. UBS management believe that a well-caffeinated employee is a good employee. And we also have a coffee shop on the ground floor, in case you missed the 12 free coffee vending areas, coffee shop on the ground floor where you can go and buy coffee. Every morning, there is a queue outside the coffee shop. It sells exactly the same coffee that you can get for free in 2 locations on every single floor. But people queue up because they want to interact with the barista, they want to have a conversation, they want the barista to misspell their name on the side of the cup. You want the human interaction. And of course, it's not just baristas, although that is a growing industry, but healthcare. You know, it may well be that a robot can diagnose you better than a human being, but funnily enough, most people don't want a robot saying, well, Mr. Donovan, we're terribly sorry, the arm's going to come off, hold still. You want a human being to deliver the bad news, even if that human being is relying on technology to back up her or his opinion, you still want the human interaction. So just because the robot may be more efficient or the computer system may be more efficient, I think there is still going to be an adapted role for human beings. So I don't think the jobs disappear. What about inflation? Inflation is not affected by technology. Inflation is a general change in prices. What technology does is change relative prices. What do I mean by that? Well, if you get a technological advance in something, let's say food production becomes massively more efficient as a result of technology in agriculture, what that will do is lower food prices relative to other prices in the economy. But that doesn't tell me anything about inflation. So let's imagine the United States becomes a lot more efficient in producing food. It's not actually that efficient in producing food. Let's say they become more efficient, they introduce more technology, food prices go down relative to other prices, relative to the price of economics, for example. Food prices go down. Now let's imagine that Fed Chair Yellen, whose term expires next year, is replaced by Ivanka Trump. Who here thinks inflation is going to be lower in that scenario? This is what an economist would call a policy error. What we would end up with is higher inflation because the central bank would be creating higher inflation, but you would have less inflation in food than in other areas of the economy. And that would be the technology story. So we're not guaranteed lower inflation. An important point to bear in mind when you're thinking about investing, you don't necessarily end up in a lower inflation world. And in some ways, I suspect technology will actually increase some companies' pricing power. When the internet retailer Amazon took over Whole Foods in the United States, there was this immediate panic that prices are going to collapse because now people will be able to compare food prices online. Well, we've been able to do that for years in the UK. About a quarter of all UK food shopping is done online. But the thing is, you don't go to the Tesco's website and say, right, I'm going to buy my milk from Tesco's, and I'm going to buy the bread from Sainsbury's, and I'm going to go to Marks and Spencer's for the canned food, and then we'll get the cleaning stuff from Waitrose. Nobody does that. Once you're into one website, that's it, you're hooked. And people don't do what they're supposed to. People aren't rational economists. It's one of the great tragedies of human civilization. People don't compare prices. I've got direct experience of this. A little over a year ago, I published a book on inflation, The Truth About Inflation, in hardback, available from Amazon and all good booksellers. And the price was £30, absolute bargain. £30, wonderfully cheap price for the content you're getting. Except Amazon made a mistake. And on the Amazon website, for the first 2 months, it was priced at £150. Now, that's still good value. But it's £120 more than every other company. And I was sending emails to Amazon. My publisher was sending emails saying, you've made a mistake. You're charging the wrong price. Everywhere else. Just Google Paul Donovan, The Truth About Inflation. Feel free to Google now. And you'll see the price is £30. We still sold books on Amazon. It's 5 times the price on every other website. And still, I had very respectable sales on Amazon. Because people don't do. Amazon, yes, that's a fair price. It will always be a fair price because it's Amazon. The brand overwhelms, and you get pricing power. I should point out, I didn't get the extra £120. Amazon gets the extra £120. I get 10% of £30. That's it. So, we end up, I think, with a more complex pricing environment. Relative prices will shift, but technology doesn't guarantee a low inflation environment. What about globalization? Over the last 20 years, globalization has accelerated in a way that we have never seen before. Today, right now, globalization is at an all-time high. The global trade share of global GDP in real terms it's about 24%, give or take. Never seen this before. Record high. The world is more integrated than ever before. And what this has been about is extending supply chains. So you produce one component in Taiwan and another component in Germany, and then you bolt it all together in China, and then you sell it to the United States. So we've had longer and longer supply chains, more complex supply chains. The fourth industrial revolution reverses that. And those countries and those companies that have succeeded by extending out supply chains in the last 20 years have got to change their business models, because this is not going to work in the next 20 years. What we are seeing now, increasingly, is the localization of production. Because robotics, digitization, 3D printing allows you to produce more locally with very little cost increase. The European clothing company, H&M, now produce most of their clothes in Europe rather than in China, because they can have a factory with 100 staff and a lot of robots producing almost as cheaply as they can in Asia with 5,000 staff, almost. But the key difference for them producing in Europe is they are very close to their market. It takes 48 hours from design to store in Europe. It takes 6 weeks from design to store in Asia. Now think about the UK weather. If, this is purely hypothetical, we have a sudden hot spell, dry spell in the UK in September, H&M are going to want summer clothing all of a sudden in their stores in September. If they're doing that in Europe, they can do that. If they're doing that from China, it's going to be 6 weeks. That means the clothes arrive in mid-October, which time there will be snow in the centre of London. And they're then left with a load of clothes that they can't possibly sell. It's a waste. It's direct cost to their profit margin. So this localization of production is becoming more and more prevalent. And if you think about it, in some industries, this has already overwhelmed us. When was the last time anybody here bought a compact disc? My nieces think a compact disc is something you put a drink on top of. They've got no idea what these funny, shiny circles are for. Because, of course, everybody downloads. See, my nieces tell me I'm very old-fashioned and out of date. No, Uncle Paul, nobody downloads. We all stream nowadays. The point is, you're effectively removing the production. Your ultimate local production is that you are taking intellectual property and turning it into music in your own home. And of course, it's not just music, it's films, even books. Truth About Inflation, all also available on Kindle. So you end up with extreme localization of product coming through. This changes supply chains, changes how the world works. It changes a lot of the assumptions about what it is to be successful, because what we used in the last 20 years to generate success will not work in the 20 years ahead. That brings me to my last point. What is the model for success? How do we achieve success as a company, as a country, in the next 20 years in the fourth industrial revolution? And the model for success is actually a very, very old model, a model that has been around for around 900 years. The model for success is the Oxford University model. Now, it's important you get this right. If you follow the Cambridge University model, you will end up with a disaster. But the Oxford model, now that is a recipe for success. There are two characteristics of Oxford which I think can be applied more globally. So the first is that when you go up to Oxford, nobody will teach you anything. You don't go to Oxford to be taught. You go to Oxford to learn. What is the difference? When you go to Oxford, you're given an essay title, you're given a reading list, you're given access to some of the best resources in the world, lectures and seminars and university libraries, but you are told, go away and research this topic by yourself. You have to learn about the topic yourself. You have to basically be flexible, be adaptable, learn how to learn. And that is critical. Because in the future, the labor force needs to be adaptable. It needs to be able to change. It's not about memorizing facts. I can guarantee if you get a university degree by memorizing a textbook, you will be a low-skilled worker in the next 20 years. I don't care what university it's come from. You're a low-skilled worker because the moment that textbook is out of date, you are out of date. And unless you have the ability to teach yourself and to adapt in a rapidly changing world, you are left behind very, very quickly. So the first aspect of the Oxford model is teaching yourself, learning yourself, that creates the flexibility. The second aspect is the diversity of opinion. So the Oxford University model is made up of a large number of colleges. And each college is a small academic community with lots of different people in it. So if I have lunch at my college at High Table, I could be sitting opposite a physicist, and there'll be an expert in medieval French literature sitting next to me, and a politics professor on the other side of the table, and a physicist just down the road, and a metallurgist sitting at the other end of the table, and a lawyer, because the lawyers are everywhere. And you have a wide range of opinion. Diversity of opinion. And in a time of rapid change, this is enormously powerful because you may not see the answer to a problem that is confronting you in a world of rapid change, but somebody else may have something useful to contribute from their own, on the surface, completely different experience. And so you draw in from a wide range of opinions. And this, I think, is increasingly important. If you end up with a monoculture, a homogenized view of the world, then you are going to suffer as something unexpected is bound to happen in a process of rapid change. And this is something we do at UBS. The Global Investment Committee, on which I sit, is a very diverse group of people. We've got diverse nationalities, diverse ethnicities, men and women, diverse age range, all sitting there. And we argue. We disagree with one another. It's not ever come to violence yet, though there are times. And the point about this is that it produces better ideas because you are forced to look at everything from as many different angles as possible. That, I think, is going to be absolutely critical in a rapidly changing world of the next 20 years. So the fourth industrial revolution for me, on the surface, it's about the technology. What's the iPhone 8 going to have which the iPhone 7 doesn't have? Answer, probably nothing. But it's about how the technology is going to change the way the world works. This is a profound series of changes that are coming in the global economy. It is something which requires you as investors, as citizens, as employees, to be flexible, to be adaptable, and to take as wide a range of opinions as is possible. But I think perhaps the most important point I can leave you with to conclude is that in a world of dramatic change, in a world that is increasingly uncertain, the one thing we absolutely must do is employ more economists to help explain what's going on. Thank you very much.